So welcome to part 2 at our look at activism, where we are discussing activism. So quickly, let's look to Kris to recap what we did in part 1.
Sure. Thank you, Jordan. In the first section, we sort of analyzed the philosophy, excuse me, the philosophy of activism, like the purpose for it, its social function, why we want to support it, why it's part of our constitutional and charter of rights, depending on where you're from. And I guess the main hitting point that we wanted to get to is that the function of activism is not the ends in itself. In other words, it's not for the show of being active. It's for the purpose of developing some type of reform or progressive policy change that needs to be addressed for the best interest of everybody. And that's not to say that certain social groups aren't allowed or don't have the right or merit awareness per se. What it's sort of more getting at is that everybody is an activist in their own ways and in many different ways, and none of them are better or worse than the other. But where we choose to focus our energies and set our priorities and which things we decide to be active about what and how we go about becoming activists or pushing our agendas, promoting our agendas, I think is more important that we analyze the function and keep in mind our end goal for the sake of betterment. I mean, we're just going to be spinning our wheels if we mindlessly go about making noise for the things that we believe in without thinking or questioning. First of all, it's stupid to believe in something you don't question. There's no problem with having faith in something, but as soon as it starts affecting other people, you really need to reanalyze your approach and your method. And the second thing is discourse. We really want to promote discourse, and that's like the common running theme with our channel, is expressing the fact that people's opinions matter regardless of whether they're right or wrong in your opinion or in my opinion. Even if we disagree with people, we want a platform where people can express those opinions so that we can discuss them rather than fight each other over them, because that's the civil way. And that's what's best for everybody. So in the past, in the first part, we talked about activism in that shape and form. For this second half, I think we are going to be progressive in discussing activism as it has been exercised up to today, how it should have been done in our opinions, and keeping in mind it's just an open opinion for which we are also trying to raise awareness. So there is a bias at play here, and we're not trying to hide the fact that we have our own opinions. We're actually trying to emphasize the fact that more people should have them. So rather than diminish other ideas, we're trying to promote our ideas, and our ideas are the promotion of more ideas.
Yeah, and I think it's also better ideas because, well, not like better as in this is a better idea than that.
No, I know what you meant. It was just funny.
Higher, like you can have an opinion, and some opinions are like, I like geckos. I don't personally like them. They're just kind of there. But it's like if you have them and you think they're the best animal out there and you like them, that's great. It's not a bad opinion. It doesn't even need to be that complex, but when it involves other people, it's good to be able to make visited by the tea fairy. It's good to be able to make and to think it through, because this is going to impact, because your opinion actually does matter, even though there's 400 million opinions in like at one time and talking about the same thing. It's best to come up with a nuanced one rather than just settling on one that's been made for you. And so I think I think I said enough on that, actually. So we could look at some, and
Why don't we start by delineating some areas where you think that we've had activism in the past so far and it's worked out? So, like things like
civil rights
feminism and
movement's the most
justice
obvious
reform.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so civil rights.
You're well versed in like the revolutions and stuff, so that's probably a good.
Yeah, so we got into that last time with revolution, but which I guess is a form of what's going on here. Okay, good. Sorry, I got thrown off my group here. Where was I?
You were saying revolutions start from activism?
Right. So revolution is, I guess, a form of activism. It's just very militant activism. And as we said in part one, militancy isn't always the thing that you should strive to, the last resort.
It should be a defense rather than an offense.
And but you see things like the civil rights movement, the suffrage movements, which, even though we've been hearing about them ad nauseum lately, they did, women do have the vote. Women do have equal rights under the law in at least Canada and America. You have the 60s civil rights movements that I think were exemplified by Martin Luther King Jr., who can't say anything bad about, who really exemplified what they were working towards. And even though it's a long process, I feel like a lot of the goals that they attained were achieved, especially with regard to race, with regard to gay and lesbian rights, where these people are now equal under the law. Now, opinions take longer to change. There's always fools out there, and we do have to suffer them to some extent.
So on the flip side, where do you think that went wrong, the civil rights movement? Like with this, I'm thinking specifically of a few examples, but I'm sure you can think of a bunch more that I can't. But like adjudicating racial
Islamic State, Malcolm X's group, I guess, was a misstep. That group Malcolm X was with originally, he was a spokesperson for the Nation of Islam, which really decried very extreme views with regard to race.
Well, extremism aside, though, where do you think that civil rights itself, like for instance, affirmative action, where they prescribe quotas for certain agencies to meet and things like that, like where do you stand on that? Do you think it's effective? Do you think it's the best approach? Do you think maybe it's a good attempt, a good start, maybe?
When you said like criticize, like find something that the civil rights movement did wrong other than extremism, it's really hard pressed, because it ended with a lot of positive changes. Now it kept going, and now we're almost going too far with it. And conceptually, I want to, in my head, I would like to separate the two, because you see the civil rights movement creating massive change, and a lot of people just stepping out of their the normal bounds of thought that they had to just try new modes of being and existing, and just try new things, which is kind of what our culture is about. What can I do that's different that'll work? Well, if it doesn't work, well, at least you had a good time, maybe. But when we take it further, you start doing quotas. What can I do as a bureaucrat? And you get that affirmative action where you get you focus more on the point of oppression more than the fixing of it, of the problem. So you see a lot of this now where you have, women need to be pushed above men because they're better. It's like, are they? They're women and we're men. They're just like, they're with us. They're not better or worse than us.
Yeah, and feminism's another good example because we made huge strides in after the feminist movement, but there's still, not only are there still inequalities between women and men, now we've branched out into this huge plethora of, gender, what do
Yeah.
they call it? What do they call that? The fluid, gender fluid.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother bag of worms.
But it was sort of spawned from the feminist movement, right? So it's almost like an offshoot, something we couldn't have foreseen being an issue until after the fact.
But the feminists, like a lot of the hardcore feminists, are actually at odds with them because, I'm saying, we need the right for a woman to choose their own destiny. We need opportunities equal to that of men. We need to be able to make our own decisions with regard to, everything, our bodies, reproduction.
Yeah. Access to birth control and maternity leave and things like that.
All this thing. My wife, Megan, is really, whenever she hears about the American maternity leave, it's like a pet peeve. She's just like, that's so stupid. 2 weeks, really?
Yeah, that should bother all of us, though.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
And
because we raise better human beings when they have parents that are available to them.
Right. So you have actual issues like that, and then the feminists who are really pushing for female empowerment are coming at odds to people who are men that become women and then claim to be like, where does their oppression lie? And then the feminists are like, they're not women because, they didn't have to go through all that female stuff. And so you have these, I think they call them TERFs now, trans exclusionary radical feminists who are now at odds with the postmodernist movement, even though they were at the forefront of it, claiming that women are, powerful. They're these creatures. They're female boosters, the boosters of the female in our society, which I may not agree, but I just don't share their zealotry, but I don't disagree because women are people and they need all the same, it sounds so hollow when I say it, but I think you know what I'm getting at. I don't want to just wave the flag because we're not here to wave the flag. We're here to look at what's going on with that. And I think that when you are an activist, I'm going to kind of bring this back into the harbor. You have a tendency to see your cause as in a vacuum, separated from all the other causes. And you have rights for this, rights for that, and everyone's fighting for screen time, fighting for this and that, but that, or they'll ally with others and you end up with the hazard of not seeing the forest for the trees. And I think that's a very big hazard. When you're only caring about race, you miss a lot of the other factors that are involved.
I think that's a critical point too. The exclusive nature of some activists, where they only justify their own cause and no other cause is worth. Like, they can't eat and chew gum at the same time. They can't care about Black or Hispanic rights at the same time as women's rights.
Yeah.
Or on the other end of the spectrum, where they think all rights are equally oppressed and everybody needs to fight and, as you say, burn the system down to fix it all at one time, which I think is just as naive.
And I think once it starts to place and this goes back to our conversation yesterday, once it becomes extremist, once you say, well, we need to denigrate this to push this up, to boost that, and that's just extremism at that point. You are not trying to find a solution, you are trying to conquer. And I think that's where activism gets hard, because you are in contention. You are in this battle of ideas and resources, and you're in this struggle to see what works. Even having a discussion is a bit of a struggle, because you are you're being challenged, you're being you're being pushed down. And if you lose, it might, like, if you lose a point because you made a bad argument, it might seem like they're against your entire argument when they're actually just arguing, like having a discussion or a debate with you. Because these things are important, and I have more
gravitas.
Yeah, more gravitas. They have implications for everyone in society, and sometimes more than others. You get stuff like environmentalism, where you have people working really hard with carbon capture technologies, plastic reclamation. You have nuclear power, new fusion reactors coming online. You have new fission technologies. You have more efficient methods of solar capture, and more efficient use of fossil fuels even. And all these things are coming together, and we're slowly getting better at it. But then you have people going up in front of the thing going like, there's a conspiracy against us to do this. And on the other side of that, you get people pushing something like the Green New Deal, which is literally just let's just throw money at the problem and hope we hit it, and taking it on faith, where this isn't something you can take on faith because, or should, because if you screw up, we lose the planet. We need to be very careful.
The stakes are high.
It's not just humanity. That's if we make the earth unlivable for all the other critters, then that's unforgivable. And whatever God you believe in is not going to take kindly.
So one of the important things I think you touched on there is that, like, when you make an argument and somebody challenges it, it might not necessarily be that because your argument had holes in it that your argument was even wrong, or that your and like it could just be a learning opportunity for you to reinforce a better way of presenting your argument towards somebody who might be susceptible to be changed by it, right? So
yeah,
I sort of want to. Oh, sorry. If you wanted to finish.
No, I was encouraging you to go.
Okay. So I sort of actually wanted to make sure I emphasize the usefulness of having tension in an argument, because when there are two sides to present and people encourage the other side to present their best argument rather than just proving themselves right so they can walk away with their chests inflated.
Yeah.
When you're engaging in contentious debate, it should be even if we don't personally like to agree with the other person, it should be our impetus to encourage the best side, the best point of view they can present. You should be trying to get the best out of the person you're arguing with, as opposed to just trying to defeat them for appeal, right? Or for optics, to look smart or to look right. I think it's far more important to have tension in these types of discussion, because the echo chamber is like a slur and a dirty word now, but everybody knows that hearing the same opinions over and over again isn't helpful or productive or useful. But on the same token, arguing for the sake of just having an opposing opinion so that you can make the other person look bad, or to make yourself look good, or to promote your own interest because they had a flawed argument, I think is a bad approach. We should be encouraging tension, but not such that it hurts people. Even if some people are hurt by contentious debate, that's a personal issue they kind of have to deal with themselves. Nobody can fix that for them. But as long as you have a respectful debate that has tension in it, you're guaranteed to get the most out of humanity, out of human thought, out of discourse as it's socially relevant and useful. So I think alleviating tension isn't or shouldn't be the motivation of activism. It should actually be encouraged to make your own position harder to contest, because that's how we all get better from having separate opinions. That's what we mean by diversity of thought. It's not just the fact that people choose to pick a position and then just stick on it just for the sake of sticking on it. And it doesn't mean playing devil's advocate like I like to do and I have a proclivity of doing. I try to do it with a purpose. I try to be the devil's advocate to help encourage deeper rumination of something or some things that we would otherwise typically take for granted. Because, you know, in our own minds, it makes sense already. We often overlook the steps we got to get there, except by being challenged.
And we all do. Like, I hate to say that, you know, I really hated it in school when people be like, we all have our bias and therefore we can't talk about anything. We can't know another person's perspective. Well, if you talk to them long enough, you can get a good sense of it, especially if they're really good at communicating. If you read a book and you feel so hard for a character that you are, you know, moved whenever you think about that character, well, that's pretty close. Now, bias is present, but we have to just work with it and live with it. And I think that's one of the things that we just have to move past, is that saying like, they don't understand me and therefore, you know, it's not worth talking to them. Well, thing is that we are all flawed. And just because you have surety of yourself now doesn't mean that in a couple of years you're going to have a completely different perspective and look back on yourself and go, wow, I was an idiot, which is almost desirable. Now, we all make mistakes, which is why we all go into classes and we all go into debates, we all go into parliament and town halls and just discuss this, because someone else is, you know, if we all put our dumb heads together, maybe we can make one smart move and iron out. And it's just, bias isn't just like, well, you have a unconscious bias because you're white or something. That's ridiculous on every level. Now, bias is more like, well, here's what I think is important because this is my perspective. And someone goes, well, here's what I think that's important. Well, what can we take from both of those to maybe help both? Or maybe I have a bias towards certain word usages and you correct my word usages. And all of a sudden I have a new bias because you were able to you know, make my perspective more nuanced because of our interaction together. And biases aren't inherent or stable. They are completely, they change with your mood, they change with your education, they change with everything. And they're also not as powerful as I think we were making them out to be. Especially with this unconscious bias training that I've seen. My wife had to do it in her school, and they were essentially calling her an oppressive terrorist or something, and she just like, because I'm white or something, because I'm in the army.
That actually scares me more. If somebody found that type of training useful, it would scare me more that they even got to the point where that was not already self-evident. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like if somebody had to be told that it's not right to be a bigot,
did you know
that's
that
what
you're
the
a
word
Nazi?
bigot means. Like you don't need a course to teach that.
Well,
you certainly don't need a course to call people who aren't bigots bigots. Like that's not the purpose of education, is to start labeling and branding people.
So I think when we get down to it, and I wanted to bring this up because I've been thinking about this since we started, is that if we get into the etymology of the word activism, like I'm not digging down into its original, but if we looked at the word itself, you are acting and you need to be active. So you live in a community and you can help your community and you're active in it. And I think this is kind of where the crux of it lies, is that what are you doing to be actively engaging in your community? And we did narrowly define it in our first section, but are you coaching the local kids soccer team? You are active in your community. You are performing an act. Are you serving on the town council and, you know, organizing town halls? Yes, you are active. And when you put the ism on it, it becomes more of the way we define it today, where you are finding faults and trying to correct them. But that is a form of activity. You are active in maintaining your community. So I feel like this is almost too simple. And but I guess it gets down to, are you helping? Are you doing this to help your community? What can you do? And I think by making it so big, and because the civil rights movement was big and it was impressive, and Martin Luther King was standing in front of all those people, he was active in his community because he was in a position to do that, and he had the talents and the gravitas to say those words at the right time in the right way to make everyone's heart just stop.
And he preached it like a preacher, like the reverend he was, right? He
Right.
would speak with magnanimity.
Like, if you haven't seen the speech or read the speech, go do it. Pause. Go read it now.
Yeah, hearing it is totally different from just reading it, and seeing it is different from just hearing it. Like,
he was in a position to be active in that way. Now, how are you in a position to be active in your community? Is your community, and if you are coaching the soccer team, if you are, funding local, if you're, buying equipment for local hockey, kids to play hockey, that's great. Are you going around fixing, putting new basketball nets on the courts, or shoveling snow?
out? Yeah, shoveling.
Yeah. Like, this is active things that you are doing to be active. And
remember back in the day when the old ladies and would like give you lemonade and cookies to the kids in the street? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when parents would help each other out looking after the kids as they played, so that the other parents could go do adult things.
Or but when it becomes something that you can't fix, like when it's not just a broken down staircase in the park that you just go and grab a hammer to fix. I don't know. But then you need to take it up a level of authority. And that's kind of when it becomes activism, I think, is that when you need to make it political, because you bring it, not because it's political, this is politics. No, it's because you're bringing it into the political sphere, and you're making it an ism. And
because
I think
it's important and it matters to everyone.
Right. We don't have fresh water, or there's no, you're saying that there's fluoride in the water, but there's not. That's Edmonton. There's asbestos in all the schools in Edmonton. Yeah, there is. They're not talking about it.
Or there's creosote and all the railroad ties. And
yeah. So these things are things that you could bring up and be active in. But it becomes an ism more when you say, when that thing picks a side. Well, railway workers are this, so this is actually labor rights, so we need this, get the IWW or Marxists or unionists on the side. It becomes, it becomes associated with a side that will take up the cause. Now, there are groups, this is why there are groups that take up causes of activism, so that, people like normal people can just go about their lives and not have to lobby constantly, go about doing, adult things. And so those groups aren't exactly useless, although they do seem so sometimes.
But just existing, at least it's sort of some kind of edifice or establishment to show that there's an intention of change, right?
Yeah.
Even if they are ineffective today, at least there's a hope that tomorrow somebody more competent might manage it better.
Well, even if there's that thing that says like you have a group of workers' rights things, and then you get a local business owner who's just gouging his employees, and now you have someone and a group of people to just stand up and go, "Hey, don't do that." And they can do it publicly. Yeah. So you have this group that'll just be like, no. And so then it'll make people think twice before, doing that kind of trouble. And so this is important. Now, I guess that would be kind of a passive activism. But when you're sitting around, but the activity in your community becomes it can become corrupted by association with non-relevant issues, powers, and people. So if all of a sudden you have like we're gonna figure out, we're gonna go and we're gonna do this and we're gonna get, we're gonna show that we have our rights and stuff, and then all of a sudden this group of communists that you didn't even know existed in your area show up and they start waving red flags, and anarchists come in and join them. They glare at each other but say, all right, let's do this. And you're kind of like, oh, I didn't know nothing was going to get done. So and it becomes different. You're no longer talking about it. You're now talking about the ends that the extremists want, and it's derailed, because the thing that an activist should be looking for is to remedy the problem itself. And
like, first and foremost, that should be the objective.
Mm-hmm.
That should be the target that we're aiming for, and everything else is just
now it comes to like targets such as income inequalities. I don't know how far I want to go into this, because even if I say this, I'm, all of a sudden I'm on thing. But gender inequality in pay is a lot more complicated than the numbers were given on one news site. So
it's not something you can fix, in other words, by just giving raises to only women, right?
Right, because then you're giving raises to women that would have gotten it anyways.
You're giving raises to women who didn't deserve it.
Well, you're giving the people that would have gotten it anyways, or affirmative action. We're going to hire more Black people, but then you hire the Black people that were in a position to get it anyways. So you're not giving anyone new.
Yeah, it's not serving its function.
Yeah, you're just giving, that person that would have gotten it later, it sooner. And you're not bringing any new African Americans into the workforce or into the high level workforce. You're just choosing the ones that are already available more, and these ones are already in a position. It's like, oh yes, I have it so hard having gone to Harvard. It's like, cool. It's like, but you're not.
I had to go to Yale. Brown. What are you, from Princeton?
Yeah, it's snooties.
I'm actually strongly against that type of thing, and it's not because I don't want Black people to succeed, and it's not because I don't see the aftershocks of not having Black people in prominent positions, because then young Black kids don't see prominent Black figures, right? So there is almost an argument to be made for promoting people even though they don't deserve it, just based on their skin color, but it's undeniably racist to do that. So if our end goal is to avoid racism, doing something racist to stop it is not helpful. No matter what the outcome looks like, even if it does some good, I don't think the ends justifies the means, and saying, let's not look at skin color, but let's give grants to people of only skin color. Or let's admit people into college of only skin color because we have a quota to fill.
Yeah.
It's not that I don't see the value in it, because I do recognize that kids growing up it needs to be normalized to see Black CEOs and women CEOs. That needs to be normalized for young girls to be able to aspire to it realistically. But on the same token, there's no shortage of people wanting to be astronauts just because there aren't many astronauts. Like, people who deserve those positions will get them, or should get them.
Yeah, and it's like, first all-female astronaut crew, and it's like, cool.
Yeah, what purpose did that serve?
Yeah, it's the science that matters here.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like...
But it's not to say we shouldn't celebrate women achieving, right? We should still point out the fact that there are women, because we want young girls to see that.
Well, and then if you do achieve, it becomes you achieved, not because you are a wonderful individual who did something, amazing in its own respect. You are a Black woman who did something amazing. or you
Yeah,
did
it
something
almost
amazing
diminishes
for
it
a black
trying
woman.
to
It's like
promote it.
like you did something amazing for all humanity as a human in relation to all humans,
Yeah.
and not just in relation to with respect to the things you overcome. It's not like that. It's yeah, we're diminishing it by making it about such a narrow thing, as you said.
Yeah,
So.
and that's why I'm sort of on the fence about it, because like I recognize that there's an issue and I recognize we should do something about it, but I really don't see there's any leg for them to stand on under the argument that we should selectively be racist and say it's okay to be racist if it's a positive thing, but it's not okay to be racist if it's negative. Like racism's going to persist as long as you keep drawing lines and skin colors.
Right. And I feel like we were doing good before about 2010. But because one of the things that we had to figure out is that, like, what do you do with the old folks that won't get rid of their old ideas? So you have the new batch of people who just, it's like someone comes out and they're like, I'm gay. And then, everyone else around them that's kind of their age is like,
so what?
Obviously.
Yeah, or obviously.
Like, neat. But then you get like,
you not to care.
But then you get the old folks. Yeah, but then you get the old folks who are like, yeah, they got this, and they got their old opinions, but like somehow, like these changes and the big changes take a long time, and sometimes we just need to wait for the opinions to die of old age.
Yeah, you can't force it.
And that's the other thing. Is like we kind of it's such a morbid argument, but it's like yeah, we could kill all the racists or something, but like if I say the word racism, you can have a racist thought without even trying. So like racism is like, we have noticeable differences, but racism is something itself, and we had racism definitely. Now we're slowly moving past it. We've been doing great, but for some reason we're stumbling on it now, because it was so fun to fight racism before, wasn't it? It was so fun to be an activist. I want to be at Martin Luther King's march. It was
like shooting fish in a barrel back then. Like, we were talking about protesting lynch mobs. Like, how easy is it to point out the fact that slavery is intolerable? Like, right. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. No discussion. It's just intolerable to promote slavery, period. So like, we don't have those obvious positions.
No. Well, and they like try and make them obvious because they say that the people back then who, the folks that were racist, who had those very poorly thought out racial hierarchies of their worldview. And history doesn't look too kindly back upon them. These people were racists, and they supported they went about it, and they persecuted black people, and they wouldn't give black people a chance or something, or they were discriminatory against homosexuality in all its forms. But and history doesn't look so. Now we're told that history won't look kindly upon you. You'll get the same treatment as those people did in history as those people did now, but it isn't obvious anymore. Like, I don't want to go walk down the street and thinking like, a black couple walks by, and I don't want to be thinking like, oh, am I making the right? Am I offending them by walking by them? I just want to be like, I just want to like notice that there's someone there, and then get on with my day. I don't want to have to think about whether or not I'm being racist, because they're just more people.
But it's the appearance of racism that you're worried about. It's not even the actual
right.
racism.
And I'm being forced to worry about the appearance of racism, which is the stupidest thing.
It's so stupid.
It's not, and I'm so. But then I have to be an ally.
It will be obvious and clear by your lifestyle and your choice of words, and you know what I mean. To listen to one thing and just harp on you for it.
Right. So then you get that feeling like, oh, maybe I am actually racist, because you convince people like that. It's like, you noticed his color. So you're racist. And it's like, okay, what do I need to do to rectify this? Like, I want to be a good person. I want to be seen to be a good person because, like, I try to be a good guy, right? Everyone thinks I'm a good guy, and everyone's like, no, you're a good guy. But like,
so the response, activism.
So activism, you need to become an ally. But the thing is that the way it's set up now is that there's no way you can help. You are, if you're helping, that means you're aggrandizing yourself. If you're not helping, that means you're, working against it. So, either you're with us or you're with the terrorists. And that mentality got us into some trouble in 2001, and it's that mentality
every year for the past 100 years. I think there's been 3 years in the last 80 or something that we haven't, or the US hasn't been at war somewhere. Like 3 out of like 80 years, something like that. It's really pathetic.
I think they were in the late 40s.
Yeah, it was probably right after the Great Depression, after they industrialized all their mattress making companies to make shells.
That are in the 90s, right before.
Oh no, there was tons of war in the 90s.
I mean like between the Gulf War and Clinton.
Well, they were that Bosnia happened around then.
Haiti. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, between Bosnia and the Gulf War.
Yeah, it's been incessant though, and we're always fighting for virtue. That's what blows my mind. Like, we murder people constantly over virtue, and they just happen to always be brown.
Right.
And we just happen to always be white, and our army just happens to always be brown and black. Like, it doesn't take a fucking rogue scholar to figure out the numbers here, right? Like, to deny racism in America over all this time doesn't mean that we're not saying there's been progress, like through the civil rights movement, affirmative action, but it does mean that it still exists and it needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and asking the question is a good start, and we all need to have that thought process going through our heads. It's like, what is like, but the thing is that we don't classify people in that 19th century fashion of the hierarchy of the races. We, like, science itself has moved way beyond that, and anyone who tries to do anything like that, scientific racism, is like laughed at by the scientific community. But at the same time, there are differences between races. There's
absolutely and genders,
touchy areas. And so this isn't, and this is where hard conversations and people get, because they want to be good, and generally most people want to be good unless you're part of those chaotic elements. That in our striving to do good and be good, we pave very complicated and noisy roads to hell. So I was going to go somewhere, but I think that that's where I was going to go. So we're all stupid to some extent, so we do have to take some time to think about it. Now, the other thing is that if you're a country and you're trying to be the best virtuous, you're trying, you're not always succeeding, and someone comes up to you and being like, hey, would you like to, could you help me with some military problems I'm having? And the US goes, no. And then, someone asks and they're like, and then, activists and Americans go like, no, this is an actual problem that we're having here. Those Balkan genocides need to be dealt with. And so the US goes, okay, no, but let's talk to the UN. Let's go to the UN together and we'll see what we can do. And then, stuff got happened, and I tried, and there was it was such a bad situation that I hesitate to say that the involvement in the Balkan Wars was, the peacekeeping was a bad thing. And I think that is a good use of that force in peacekeeping. But what happened after 9/11 was a poor use of force. And someone asks for help, kinda, but they didn't really even ask, and they came in. So
it's sort of that they considered it a threat to themselves if they didn't help. So rather than
Yeah.
going in there to help people, they were going in there to preserve themselves. And that's the same mentality as the reason why they didn't want to liberate slaves, is because they were scared to death of an uprising from all the
Right.
masses, right?
But interestingly, in the North, a lot of the anti-slavery was built around economic things. Like, if we have slaves, then my boss can just buy slaves instead of hiring me and my family. We need to get rid of slavery,
Yeah.
which is a pretty good argument because slavery is a terrible economic state. But it's not exactly a virtuous argument. But it does the job.
Right. And a lot of people actually think the Civil War was all about like liberating slaves and stuff, and it wasn't. It was far more an economic matter and a political matter. It just happened to be favorable in hindsight.
Right. And the slavery did need to be dealt with, and the North did know that, because slavery doesn't employ your populace. And they knew that the economics rode hand in hand with the
well, how could the North compete with an economy of slavery? Like, you just have relentless output with zero input compared to a bunch of people trying to balance an equilibrium.
Well, that's the thing. Then it seems like the South would have had a economic juggernaut there, just waiting to be exploited because of all the slavery. But historically, we see that slaves actually don't produce more. They don't produce excess value, and they don't produce, and they don't last as long, and they don't produce more workers as much. Whereas freed workers will get paid, they can invest, they can make more workers because they're probably better fed. And this shows up again we see this in Rome, where slavery it's kind of what they did, but it wasn't actually a healthy process and held them back quite a bit.
But that's why their slavery sort of evolved into a family dynamic, where a lot of slaves were just outright slaves and beaten, but a lot of them were like a second spouse or
he's a slave, but he's also the tutor of the house.
Yeah, so you don't want them teaching your kids all.
So it was like a thing, but like at the same time you have, which is described in Solzhenitsyn, you have the Soviet Union's slave state, where they were just like, oh, we need more workers. Well, let's just go round up a bunch of dissidents and charge them with Article 9.
Or the Chinese today, let's just round up a whole bunch of, what do they call it? Like defamation or whatever of the government. When you criticize the government, that's like against the federal law of China. And if they need workers in their concentration camps, which exist today, by the way, a cause worth activism.
Or organs.
Like the Uyghur population and...
Yeah, the Uyghurs and the Falun Gong.
Anyway, the Falun Gong.
By saying those things, YouTube's going to demonetize us, but we're not monetized, so...
Yeah, even better, no ads. So share, and subscribe if you want to support content.
If you see ads on our channel, let us know, because don't buy that stuff. Because they didn't pay us.
Don't buy their stuff. I think they will show up now, though, because YouTube changes terms of policies and stuff.
Yeah. So, but what we were getting to, and I think I was getting to something there, is because we got to talking about slaves, but it was a bit of a digression. So what I was talking about was, what do you do so you go out and you find something to be active about? What do you do when someone comes and asks you for help? Now, if they dress it up and they can make it look like, yes, I'm a poor, down on my luck dictator, and I'm just being oppressed by all these, insurrection people, and I just need a little bit of help. Could you and your organization rally your big old strong government and help me? It's like, sure, let's go in. But at the same time, like, you really have to see what you're getting into, because a lot of people are always asking for your help. Become an activist, get involved. And
they're looking to manipulate you too. They could come to you with a plight that seems perfectly reasonable, and then you find out you're perpetrating the genocide.
Yeah, and you're just like,
oops. Like, what do you say? Sorry?
Maybe try and get out and be active against it.
But it's too late. You've already massacred people. Like the My Lai massacre in Vietnam. Like,
That one was
Something
a bit. I'm
Casey.
thinking more like that might be a bad example, but a better example would probably be.
Well, the Vietnamese people didn't ask for them to come.
I know, but it's it's not as systemic. That was more of a
But
there's something in the trees. Everyone opened fire at once, and then everyone overreacted for like a day and a half.
But it's an instance of America going to war, thinking they were helping people, and then perpetrating a massacre and saying sorry.
Right. Now, something more. I think a better example would be recruiting local populations in Poland, Ukraine, and Hungary to round up Jewish populations during the Second World War. Whereas, we need you to help this population. These well-dressed, clean guys come in because they're still heading east. On the way back, they wouldn't be as they wouldn't look as good. And they say, you know what? We're going to give you all this stuff. We're going to help you guys out. We know the old regime wasn't very good, but here's all we need you to do. We just need you to tell us, we're not going to hurt them. We just need you to tell us where these, the local populations of Jews are. And, and then we can help you guys out. They frame it really nice. And then, he's like, oh, all right, well, this guy here is Jewish. And, and then you're just like, oh, shit, I'm a bad person. So, but it's the same thing in because there's tricks you can play. And there's one that you hear like there's like Vietnamese, North Vietnamese, and Chinese tactics, and Japanese. I think it was Chinese tactics where they take with their prisoners and they'll make you say one small thing, like say something bad about Canada. Just write a story, just a small thing about one small thing that's bad about Canon. They'll get you to admit something. It's like, see, that wasn't that hard. And they'll give you something in response. Every time you say something,
you get a piece of chocolate or something, and you get saved an hour of torture.
Right. And so after a while, with a couple pieces of fruit, they've turned you into a zealot for their side.
China still does that.
Yeah, and a lot of the groups, when you look at the rhetoric in modern activism, it's like you say well, wasn't it bad that the Canadian government did this? It's like, well, yeah. So don't you think they could have done other bad things? And then the reward is, social credit, where, you get social capital, where, you look like you're being virtuous. And then more and more, it's easier to say like, well, we should just get rid of the Canadian government. You fall into the trap where it's just, once you start hearing, it's like these things where it's say one bad thing, or how could you do this? Say one bad thing. And then when you respond unkind, they just say, well, I didn't know you were that kind of person. He's like, oh, I didn't know I was that kind of person either. It's like, no, don't play that game. It's a trap. So, again, I guess the focus becomes, what are you trying to accomplish?
And it comes down to awareness too. You need to be aware of the deceptions. You can't just trust everybody's coming to you with sincere issues. You know what I mean? No matter what they look like when they're presenting it to you, you really have to actually analyze what people are saying and say, does that actually achieve our end goal? Does it actually fix a problem to give money away to people who don't have money? Does that make them less poor?
Yeah.
No, their ability to earn is the problem, not the money they have sitting in the bank. Their inability to earn money to put in the bank is the problem. You need to fix the problem, not just the superficial issue.
What if we just gave everyone money? Poverty solved. Yeah. So
it's like educated people, we assume experts just know everything. And we've made a culture of just like being lazy with our intellectualism and not thinking for ourselves because we have so many experts who are so expert that we just decide that we don't have to know for ourselves anymore. Or we just trust the fact that there must be some deeper opinion that I don't understand, or you have to like wash all that away and actually pay attention to your own activism. Like the things that not you as you, but I mean us as a people. Like we need to not just assume that educated people say the right things, because there are always going to be people like Paul Wolfowitz who will say, well, I'm part Jewish, and I can still support my own or draw my own conclusions, and he's highly educated. But like, if you listen to the things the guy says about America's imperialism and supporting the dominance of white people, he's pretty descriptive about his intentions and motivations, and he's very picky and choosy with the data he pulls out because he's a propagandist. And just because he's really well educated and super famous and he says a lot of things, it doesn't mean that he's right. And in the same token, Noam Chomsky, who's an outspoken advocate for people's rights, and he's a world-renowned linguist in his field of study. You can listen to Noam Chomsky and still pick apart flaws in his arguments. You can still see that there's a hopeful naivete about the way he represents political figures, while in the same token, he's discussing all the corruption that's rampant in every single arm and branch of societal structure across the board worldwide, especially when he talks about war and economics. Like, he'll swift from one side, but it doesn't mean he doesn't have something to say, and it doesn't mean he's always right, though, just because he's smart.
I'm not on Noam Chomsky's side, but he's one of the people that I generally will listen to.
Yeah,
even
me
though
too.
I don't completely agree with him. And I almost treasure that when I can find someone on the other side, or on a side that I don't agree with, not the other side, because it's not just me and the other. Someone that I don't agree with that I can take seriously and go through, because there's definitely tons of different
Norman Finkelstein's another great example.
Yeah, because I'm not a Marxist, but
I don't totally agree with him, but he's very right on a lot of important points.
He's worth listening to, but that's the thing. He's also willing to talk with people on the other side. So you find people who are willing to not like debate and see who's right. Debate of the century, Peterson versus Zizek. Like, it's like, oh god, whatever. And then but then like you find these people who are willing to sit down and be like, let's see what we got.
Let's hash it out.
Yeah. And that's kind of, those are the ones that are like candy. Because like the debate versus this and that guy, because they're like, theoretical rivals. It's like, oh boy, it's like a boxing match. I'm not even gonna tune in.
But I do enjoy it for that aspect. Like, I do like sport and I like competition and but it's just, you got to segregate the two. You got to say, like, this is for entertainment and knowledge, and this is for activism and knowledge.
Because I like the Intelligence Squared people do a good job of that.
And then they tried to do stuff like lightning rounds, and like they just Americanized like the stupidest things you could possibly inject into like civil discussion. So like everybody gets it wrong is what I'm getting at.
Well, we all get it. Yeah, and that's the thing. We all get a bunch wrong.
And we all get a bunch wrong. That's the point of diversity of thought right there. To find the pearls in everybody's oysters.
So,
good metaphor with the shell and everything. Eh?
Yeah. So I think we might be coming up. Yeah, I think we can, because I think we've in the second half we've said a lot of came to some really interesting conclusions, and I feel like if we keep talking, we're just going to start rehashing points and just start saying the same stuff with.
I'm looking forward to part 2 with the protests.
Yeah. So I guess this is part 2. So
this is part 2 of Activism. We'll come up with another title.
So Extremism, Activism, and I would like to. So the next one we're gonna do in this, I guess, playlist.
Oh, we could call it Actionism.
Ooh. So we will look at protesting itself, as I have a lot of thoughts on that. But for next week, we will be getting a bit off track and looking at something a little different, so that we're not talking about just one thing on this channel. So we'll be looking at bringing in a guest to talk about genetic developmental genetics, which shall be really fun. So
stay tuned.
yeah, stay tuned. If you think anyone might be interested, or wouldn't mind hearing us banter while they're making dinner or something, just send a link out and subscribe, and please comment. We'd love to hear from you. So
word up. Thanks for the talk.